Hi everybody, welcome to Bree Science Lab. Today we're going over the leg muscles, right? A lot of these are probably familiar to y'all if you're taking an anatomy class at graduate school or undergraduate school. Now we don't have all of the muscles on this model, but we have the most important ones that you're generally going to see in your classes. So we're going to go ahead and start. We're gonna go ahead and start. Now, there are a few things I would like to review before we do that, right? So in anatomical position, we have our hands, palms facing forward, and our feet are slightly pointed out, but they are facing forward, right? So our leg model right here, this is a left leg, okay? So this would be the more medial side. If I hold it all the way up, you can tell because we have the big toe or the hallux on this side. So we know this is the medial side. That makes this the lateral side, okay? This is obviously going to be your more proximal end or superior end, and your foot would be that more distal end, right? That being said, we also have a few motions we want to go over, right? So abduction would be taking our leg out, right? Abducting. So basically you're taking away from the midline, right? You're abducting away from the midline. If you were adducting, so ADD, you would be bringing your leg, from out to in, okay? So abduction, going out, adduction, going in, okay? So that's abduction and adduction. What I think of is adding to the midline. You're adding to the thickness of the midline by adding your leg, right? Abducting, you're abducting or you're taking away from that midline. So now my midline's a lot thinner, right? Because my leg's out. Your abductors, so your abductors, are generally going to be found on the outside, right? That more lateral part of whatever you're talking about, right? So it could be your bone, your like the adductor tubercle on your bone, your muscles, the outside of your muscles, so it's going to be on the lateral side. You'll see those abductors because that's what they're doing, is they're abducting, so you're generally going to find them on that area where they're doing that work. That being said, your adductors are going to be found on that inner thigh. Adductors are going to be found on that inner thigh or the more medial compartment. We'll go over the foot muscles in a different video, and I'll also go over the inversion and eversion motions that you hear a lot with the foot. But besides that, you'll also see hip flexion and hip extension, as well as knee flexion, knee extension, and ankle flexion, ankle extension, right? So just to give you a reminder, extension is increasing that angle, right, of that joint. So if we were extending our hip or hip extension, we would basically be bringing our hips forward, our leg back, right? So that's hip extension. That's increasing. So think about like going upstairs, sprinting, hip thrusts in the gym, any of those. And those would all be hip extension. That being said, if you were to kick your leg up, that would be decreasing that angle, right? Decreasing rather than extending. So that decretion of angle would be flexion, hip flexion. If we go a little bit more inferior, where we're talking about our knee, right? Those muscles that act on our knee are going to be found right here in our thigh. Knee extension, okay, would be like kicking a soccer ball, right? So you have your leg here and you're kicking out, right? You're kicking. Knee flexion would be decreasing that angle. So think like butt kicks. If you ever did PE where you kick your butt, see how that angle is decreased rather than all the way open, that's increased. If we go down, we'll go over dorsiflexion and plantar flexion in our foot video, but you have those where your foot's going up and like that. So that would be plantar flexion. This would be dorsiflexion. Think dorsiflexion like a ballerina, plantar flexion like bringing your toes towards you, okay? Eversion and inversion, just really quickly. E version would be eek, you know, like you have to get something off the bottom of your foot. You just stepped in gum, right? So your foot would be going outwards, and you'd be like, think about like rubbing like something off of the bottom of your foot. So continuing with that quick review of motion, E version was going out, so putting your feet like that. So imagine the palm of my hand being the bottom of your foot. You're moving that foot out, right? So if that helps, like that, okay? Inversion, think of bringing your palms or your bottoms of your feet inward, so they're now facing inside. I'll give you a better view of that in our foot video and our motions video, but that's just a quick review, right? So, easiest way to learn the leg. It's a big model. It has a lot of parts and a lot of components. If you have a leg model available to you at a school or at home at work, I would definitely recommend using it and trying to name these yourself, because that's going to help you the most. Okay, but I have some tips and tricks as well. So let's go ahead and get started on the leg model. We're going to start with the upper leg, right? The upper leg, the thigh region, the femoral region, whatever you'd like to call it. We're going to do this. So these are going to act both on your hip and on your knee. Okay, so they're going to do flexion and extension, abduction and adduction of those joints in your leg. Okay, so right now, we already said that this was the more medial side, right? We know that because of the big toe right here, right? Big toe right here. This is the medial side. If you didn't see the foot, say you're taking a test, you're studying, you can't see the foot, you just have an image or a model of the upper thigh or the thigh. Easiest way to tell medial versus lateral is this guy right here, okay? This is the IT band. You've probably heard of this in school or in sports. All right, this is the iliotibial tract or the IT band. You're definitely going to want to know both of those names. Often you are tested on both. You are required to know those, and it's good to just know them. So that is always going to be on the lateral side, right? And that's the easiest, quickest way to know which way is lateral or medial. If you also start to recognize some of the more medial muscles, that will help as well, right? So I'm going to bring this a little farther in so you guys can see it, okay? We're going to start up here, okay? So first and foremost, we have this guy right here, okay? It's leading into that IT track or iliotibial tract or IT band. It's going right there. This is your tensor fascia latae. Your tensor fascia latae. Often this will be shortened to TFL. TFL, your tensor fascia latae, right? Tensor fascia latae, sorry. Trying to get you guys a good view here. TFL or tensor fascia latae. When I was learning these muscles, the people that taught me would tell me a story about how they were really, really tense because they were running late to class because they got a latte, right? So they were trying to hurry, and they were running really fast to get to class on time. And you know, it was all because of that latte that they were late, and that's why they were tense, right? Because they were gonna be late to class, late to anatomy class. So tensor fascia latae. Tense because you were late to class, because that's why you're going so fast. So tensor fascia latae, or TFL. So that's right there. That's going into that IT band, okay? Now, if we go right here, right? So this is the anterior compartment. Now we're looking kind of medially, right? This is the sartorius. The sartorius, you can see it goes all the way down. Sometimes you'll hear this called the seatbelt muscle. The seatbelt muscle, because it's going from lateral to medial, like you would buckle a seatbelt in your car, right? You would go from lateral next to the window to inside to the medial compartment where the belt buckles in, right? So it's sometimes called the sartorius or the seatbelt muscle, but this is anatomically the sartorius, okay? Then the most obvious guys right here on the front, right? These are your quads. You've probably heard a lot about them. There are 4 muscles that make up your quadriceps, okay, or your quads, and they're right here located on the front. So because they are located on the front, we know that these are going to be knee extensors. Knee extensors. So a reminder, knee extension was going from a decreased angle out. So like you're kicking someone, right? So that was knee extension. So your quadriceps are mainly gonna do that, except for this guy right here, this one right here on the front, okay? This is also gonna do hip flexion. It's the only one of the quadriceps that'll do that though, right? So this does both knee extension and hip flexion. And this is known as your rectus femoris. Your rectus femoris. If I zoom in, you can kind of see the striations. It reminds me of a little bit of a fish. If you ever look at it in person, this is the rectus femoris. So it's the first part of your quads, right? If I go ahead and I turn it this way for you guys, you can see the second part, right? So here was that tensor fasciae latae, here was that IT band, so we know we're looking laterally, and we have our rectus femoris, right? So this muscle right here is your vastus lateralis. Vastus lateralis. It is also a quad, all right? And vastus lateralis, we know it's going to be lateral because it's right next to that IT band, which is why it's lateralis. So vastus lateralis, rectus femoris. Those are your first two, okay? Now, if I turn it, you guys see this sartorius, you know you're looking at this medially, all right? You have your third quad, your vastus medialis. Your vastus medialis, okay? So, vastus lateralis, vastus medialis, and if I take the rectus femoris off, you can see that deep to the rectus femoris, you have your rectus intermedius, or sorry, my apologies, vastus intermedius, okay? Vastus lateralis, vastus intermedius, vastus medialis, okay? All three of these are vastus muscles. This one is just the only one named differently. It's rectus femoris, okay? And technically, this is not showing you a muscle right here, but it's showing more gray on top of it, but if you ignore that, that's where the vastus intermedius is, okay? Some models might just show this this fibrous sheath right there, okay? So that was your quads, all right? Pretty easy, pretty simple. They took up the entire anterior compartment, right? So now we've gone over the quads, the TFL, and the IT band, right? And the sartorius. So I'm gonna go ahead and take that sartorius muscle off, right? Super fun. The leg has lots of little things that you can take off. So I'm taking that sartorius muscle off to give us a better view of the medial compartment. Now, the medial compartment is going to be made up of those adductors, so adductors, okay? Because they're adding to that midline. They're bringing that leg from out to in, okay? So we're going to start with this little guy right here, okay? It's very small. If you can see, it's just like a little triangle. That's all it is, that little triangle. Not even this part. This isn't it, okay? That's not it. Just this little triangle. That, let me get a zoomed in view. Okay. That is your pectineus muscle, right? Your pectineus muscle is that. How to remember this? Think it looks like a bird's beak. It's a little triangle, it looks like a bird's beak, and what do birds do? They peck, okay? If you ever had a woodpecker in your backyard, you know, in one of the trees, it's a pectineus, so it pecks, okay? That's the easiest way to remember that, right? That being said, you now are gonna have your adductor muscles. They actually have adductor in the name. You have three of them. It's gonna be adductor brevis, adductor longus, because brevis and longus usually go together, and adductor magnus, right? So that adductor brevis is that little part right there next to the pectineus, all right? So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna zoom in so you guys can see this. Brevis. Adductor brevis was that little guy right there. Pectineus was this triangle, right? That was pectineus. This is adductor brevis. How to remember that? Adductor brevis is in the crevice, okay? It's not actually that big, right? It's just covered by all these muscles, and it's only able to be seen from that little crevice, so adductor brevis is in the crevice, right? Then longus is usually next to brevis, right? So if we move over here, this is adductor longus. adductor longus. So adductor longus, adductor brevis, okay? Then you're gonna have your adductor magnus, right? And this one is a little tricky because it can be pinned from multiple areas. It's so big, right? So if you were asked what this muscle right here is, let me get right here. If this muscle right here, or if I flip it over, this muscle, or even down to here, okay, any of this is the adductor magnus, right? So the adductor magnus is actually all of this, okay, all of that, and you can see it's going underneath this muscle right here. This muscle right here, this long, tall one, this is the gracilis. So we say that the gracilis stands gracefully tall, right? Gracefully tall, the gracilis, okay? And that's on the medial compartment, right? So it's also gonna do that adduction. And it's covering up part of that adductor magnus. And don't get confused, some models are gonna show this little split right there. This is still the adductor magnus as well as this, right? So I left this one, not for last, but I left it till now because it's kind of a funky muscle. It's gonna sound familiar. It's your iliopsoas. This is your iliopsoas, right? So this was where your vastus intermedius was, vastus medialis, that pectineus and adductor brevis, adductor longus, right? This muscle right here, above all that, is your iliopsoas. And it sounds familiar probably because it's actually a combination of two different muscles that you most likely already learned if you've watched my other videos. Now we're getting to back here, okay? Now we're getting to the posterior. So we're gonna see a lot of hip extensors up in this region, and then we're gonna see the knee flexors, right? Because we're now looking at the posterior compartment. We're gonna start with one of the main hip extensors, which is actually your gluteus maximus. This is your gluteus maximus right here. You have three gluteal muscles. You're gonna have your gluteus maximus, your gluteus medius, and your gluteus minimus, okay? Those three. However, some models are not gonna show all three muscles. Like this model I have right here, you can only see the gluteus maximus. I can even take it off for you. Gluteus maximus. And I'm gonna zoom in, the gluteus medius, okay? The gluteus minimus is not found on this model. However, that does not mean if you're taking this class at a university that your model will not have it as well. Yours very well might have it. It just depends on where you get your model from, what type it is, right? And what layers it's showing. So that being said, right, so we can see we took off that gluteus maximus, right? So we took that off, I set it aside. We saw the gluteus medius right here, right? Oops, the gluteus medius right here. We know that this is our IT band, so we're more like lateral right here, right? Gluteus medius. Now, this one below it is the piriformis, okay? This is the piriformis right here, all right? I can zoom in a little bit. The piriformis, okay? A zoomed in view, right? So, gluteus medius, piriformis. Then we're gonna get to something called the gemellus sandwich, all right? Or the gemella sandwich. That's what we like to call it here where I learned it. Right here, gemella sandwich. This right here, this little muscle at the top is the superior gemellus muscle. Superior gemellus. This one inside of the gemellus sandwich is the obturator internus. The obturator internus. So think obturator internus is internal to the sandwich, right? It's in between those two bread layers. Below the obturator internus, you're gonna have that inferior gemellus. That inferior gemellus. And I can zoom in a little bit if that helps. Okay, so see those three lines right there? That little sandwich, there you go. The top one will be that superior gemellus. That middle one is gonna be obturator internus. And then you have your inferior gemellus, okay? So, then we get to this one right here. This is your quadratus femoris. your quadratus femoris, okay? It's not really part of the sandwich. It's called the quadratus femoris, femoral region, and quadratus because it has kind of looks like a square, which is why it's called the quadratus. So we went over those. We went over the quadratus femoris. That leaves the hamstrings, right? So this is your hamstrings right here. They were called that because, like, you know, like ham, so pigs used to be hung up by their hamstrings in like the meat shops and stuff. So that is your hamstrings, right? That's where the name comes from. So it's these 4 muscles, just like your quads. You have 4 back here. These ones are going to be your knee flexors, right? So they're going to decrease that angle at your knee. So like butt kicks, right? It's going up like that. You're decreasing that angle of your knee. So if I zoom in for you, you're gonna have bicep muscles. So just like you have the biceps in your arm, right? You're gonna have biceps in your leg as well. This is gonna be known though as your biceps femoris. All right, femoris because we're in that femoral region. So our ones in our arms were biceps brachii because it was in that brachial region. This one is your biceps femoris long head specifically. You have 2 heads for the biceps femoris. So this was the biceps femoris long head. If I kind of rotate this a little bit, you can see the biceps femoris short head underneath the long head, right? So it's right there. That's the biceps femoris short head. I can actually take this off and give you a little bit of a better view. Let's see if I can get it off. There you go. This is your biceps femoris short head right there. You'll see it better once I get this one off. These are your other 2 hamstrings, right? So you're gonna have this one. This is semitendinosus, and surrounding it, you have the semimembranosus, okay? Semimembranosus. And how to remember that, right? So you have a tendon, semitendinosus, right? So it's long, and surrounding it is the semimembranosus, so kind of like a membrane. So the membrane in a cell surrounds all of the organelles, right? Membranes like the osseous membrane, all of those kinds of things, right? They all surround something, right? So think of the semimembranosus surrounding that semitendinosus. See how it's kind of squeezes out here on the side? That's how I remembered it. Okay, so now we have both of the hamstrings off, which gives you a better view of down here, right? So this muscle right here was that biceps femoris short head. All right, and what's funny about it is you can see, while this isn't a video going over nerves yet, you can see this nerve running directly over it. That's actually your common peroneal nerve. And the reason it goes directly over the biceps femoris short head is important because the entire posterior of your leg is innervated by the tibial nerve, all right? But this one, this is the only exception, is your biceps femoris short head is actually innervated by the common peroneal nerve. And that nerve you see running over the muscle is actually the common peroneal nerve. So if you ever forget the innervations of your posterior leg, just remember, it's all tibial nerve except for that one. The biceps femoris short head is innervated by the common peroneal nerve, and it's running right over it.